Okay, it looks like we're live. I hope my internet connection isn't too slow. This image is definitely freezing. Um, I was going to do another silly stream today, but is this blurry for you guys too out there, or? Oh, I'm not sure if the camera's wet or something. This is really strange. Let's see what I can do. Maybe it's okay. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. It's freaking me out. We're gonna do the silly stream thing, but I just woke up in a bad mood, and I wasn't really feeling very well. So I decided that I would rather talk about some other stuff tonight and not do that. I actually did end up eating a couple of panelas, starting to feel a little bit weird, but definitely not the heroic dose that I had planned on. Man, somebody, if you guys are watching, will you let me know if this is just blurry and weird looking? Anybody out there? Okay, either way, I mean, I'm just talking, so I guess I just won't worry about what the hell's going on there. I've had a lot of experiences with ESP type phenomena, and even channeling inadvertently a couple of times, including dead people. And I have a lot of difficulty, I guess, in deciding exactly how to interpret these phenomena or how I want to relate to them, I guess. And my MO is basically taking the woo out of spirituality, right? So, as Terence McKenna said, you don't want to become so open-minded that wind is whistling through. In a chakra, you have absolutely no reason to believe that they're real, and yet people will just, this is like people say they're real, so they're real. That does not work for me. And absolutely the experience I've had with psychics and mediums is that they are almost all totally full of shit, and they know it. Some of them are well-meaning and full of shit, which is a little better, but you know, what can happen is that someone can have one of these experiences and you know, they've had precognition once. They have received information that turned out to be correct a few times. And so they start believing that everything that they're thinking is a legitimate message from the spirit world, or all of their precognitions are correct. And I think even for the people that are the most attenuated to this kind of stuff, that's just never the case. Also, you know, when you look at the published material, I mean, I've spent years poring over allegedly channeled material, looking for anything that I felt was compelling or interesting, or that had any kind of gave any reason to think like this is you know, preternatural, or that no human, it would require the office of some higher intelligence to dispatch knowledge of this you know, high nature, or however you want to think about it. And it's just not there for the most part. So that's a very long-winded way of saying, I guess, that I've been very much on the fence, even with my own experiences, which I'm going to relate a few of them in a row in a minute that are fucking crazy. I mean, this stuff was, and I think it's interesting to note that I didn't believe in it when it happened. Not that I didn't believe in it exactly, you know, I was open to the possibility there could be something to it, but I certainly was not a believer in, you know, channeling dead people specifically. But you know, I've apparently done this with astonishing accuracy, not even really intending to, several times. Something happened yesterday that was pretty compelling along those lines. And so before this is over too, I want to talk about some alternate explanations as well for what could be happening with these phenomena. And so when I was talking about, you know, not becoming so open-minded through your ears, or you know, abandoning skepticism to an inappropriate degree, I want to relate some things that I've seen to kind of illustrate what that looks like when people do this. So what inspired all of this and got me thinking about it was this Netflix documentary that we were watching the other night about the afterlife. And something that has struck me a long time ago when dealing with these psychics that I have known that were absolutely at least pulling stuff out of my mind that they had no way of knowing. For example, we had this really weird experience with this helicopter that seemed to be following us everywhere in LA. And it got to the point where we were starting to wonder if like we were wanted for something and like we'd been falsely accused of homicide or, you know, because it was just weird. Like we were camping on a bypass or an underpass or like by a ramp in LA just because we couldn't find a hotel and we had a tent and we woke up and there's this helicopter circling and so then, you know, we were just driving around and I was like looking and I'm like, man, that helicopter's still there. And so, we went to a parking lot and parked, and the helicopter's like circling around that parking lot. And I'm looking at my girlfriend, and I'm like, okay, clearly this helicopter is actually following us. But if that's true, where are the cops? This has been going on for 30 minutes or something. If it's not the cops, then what are we like having some kind of collective hallucination, or what the fuck is going on? And so, so we're going back to Colorado from LA, and that helicopter is there, like 75 miles, you know, towards Nevada, I guess it was. And so I see this psychic lady and this wasn't the only time she did something like this, by the way. It was pretty consistent. She worked at like the local New Agey crystal cruncher shop in Durango, Colorado. And so I walk through the door and she looks at me and says, they were testing holographic helicopters in LA this weekend. And the idea sounded so dumb, you know, first of all, that, so I still, what I'm getting at there is I don't have any idea what to think of what happened, or the fact that she said this to us. But I do know that it's definitely not out of the question that our brains can pick up other brain waves and interpret information like a very sophisticated antenna. And I've experienced this even with random street people where they'll just come up and start talking about whatever you're thinking about. And some of the guys that did this in Santa Cruz actually told me that it was part of their hustle and explained to me how they did it. They said they would have a couple of beers and the mind kind of goes blank and it makes it easier to be receptive to these like telepathic feedback loops, I guess. So what I'm getting at with that is that these mediums on this Netflix documentary, a couple of things struck me right away. One was that the two that really seemed legitimate, like unless this was staged and Netflix just is totally, you know, or whoever made the documentary is completely putting us on, two of them were absolutely accurate. And I noticed a few things. I noticed that their description of these experiences matched my experiences in ways that were extremely specific. And I definitely had this like epiphany sitting and watching this, that what these mediums are describing has been happening to me since I was a child. And I just always, you know, even when the information turned out to be true, I still kind of just wrote it off, at least in part, as imagination and coincidence. And you know, I'm from the deep South, and even as an open-minded person, I'm pretty cautious about, you know, believing in the voices in my head are spirits and or whatever, because, you know, partly for our own safety, it's good to be skeptical of, and don't believe everything you think, you know. I mean, that's definitely sound advice. But their descriptions of how this stuff worked and how it was subjectively for them was startlingly similar to my own experiences. And not only that, but they would actually speak about interacting with these spirits in the same way that I do, which is to not call them spirits. They would say things like, when we're interacting with consciousness, this is how it is. And so to tie this all together, though, even though a couple of these mediums were able to produce information that a very high specificity, and very, very, very consistently, and without a bunch of studies, are well known for. They were, one of them in particular was very just. It was just all just right there, and it was all relevant to the degree that it's really pretty much impossible to dismiss the stuff that she was saying. But the thing that I noticed is that every single thing that every one of these mediums said to the person they were talking to was stuff that that person was thinking about at the time. So there is no proof, even with these very specific, and that's what the people that were experiencing this were saying. Finally, proof that my father is still there, and I feel for these people because of course we want to believe that life continues after death, and we want to believe that we can have contact with people that are close to us that we've lost. So I think we can be quick to jump to conclusions, and it's not proof. Is it an indication that it's possible that these things are real? Absolutely. But if we're really truth seekers, if we want to be good at metaphysics, which is my orientation, that's my agenda, right? Is to treat this almost like a science, which I think a lot of people are afraid to do because I think they feel threatened by their own skepticism that they're going to kill their woo. You know what I mean? They're going to shut the door irreparably and not have that dimension to their lives because I think there's a fear that it isn't real, even for the people that believe in it. But for me, I want to know what's really happening, and so it's not proof. It's just not. Also, I was trying to think of how we could devise an experiment to determine that we were actually not dealing with just subconscious telepathy or even some universal mind, that consciousness and all the information in the universe is stored in like the 0 point field or something people have theorized. We don't know that it's not just that, no matter what information it is. And then I thought, well, if we could just get some information that only the dead person would know and that the person that knew them was not aware of, that still wouldn't do it. Because it still just could be just extracting information from this universal mind, this collective consciousness. So the jury is still out, although I will tell you something that happened yesterday. And these type of experiences for me are a little bit more compelling. And there was an example of this in the documentary. One of the women had just lost her mother, and she told her mom, send us a cardinal. It was her favorite bird. Send us a cardinal when you get to the other side, just to let us know that there is another side. And they got this on video. This cardinal, like a week after her mom died, was like beating into the window, flying into it over and over and over again. And so they go outside, and the cardinal like lands in the woman's hand, and she's like, responding the way you would expect, and then she tries to throw it, and the thing flies back and lands even closer to her face. This is a wild cardinal. It definitely makes absolutely no sense that this would happen. And to me, that type of thing is a little bit more compelling than even a medium knowing things that they could just be receiving from your own subconscious mind. There's really not an indication of anything regarding an afterlife or evidence for an afterlife. But that cardinal thing was pretty goddamn weird. And so what happened to me is pretty much exactly along those lines. The day of my mother's funeral, my stepfather, we were at his mother's house, and I don't know why he said this. Maybe I think it was a fox or a hawk. Maybe it was a hawk. I think it was a hawk. Landed in the backyard, and my stepfather said it. Maybe it's your mom, and I was like, no, she's more of an eagle person, I would think. And so after the funeral, I walked out with his sister, who was actually present for the statement and this occurrence. So I walk out of the funeral home, and this bald eagle swoops down into the parking lot. I mean, like, I don't think I've ever seen one fly that low, unless it was going to kill a fish in the river or something. And granted, we were in the Potomac area in Washington, D.C., where there's a lot of bald eagles there. But still, it was pretty weird. And it flew in our direction extremely low and sort of like swooped around through the parking lot right directly in front of us. And so that was trippy. Uh, but what happened yesterday might be even a little bit more strange because I keep referencing this documentary that we were watching about the afterlife, but there was one point where I can't remember the significance of this butterfly, but the butterfly had something to do with the guy's dad. And, something like that, he had mentioned something, and he goes into this theater with no windows on like the fifth floor of the building, and there's this butterfly flying around. And so he goes back to the theater he owns, and he's telling one of his employees about this. And they look up, and there's a butterfly flying around them, and they actually got video of it. So it appeared, and you can see the look on the employee's face. It's clearly like, what the fuck? So when I saw this, I thought, okay, so if this is legit, tomorrow let's have some sort of sign from my mom that is related to this scene in some very obvious way. And so when I came home from town, when I went to walk in our front door, we have this puppy that we have, what do you call it, like rescued from somebody's left it on the street. And my mom's favorite song was Dog and Butterfly by Heart. And so I come home, and the dog is leaping after this butterfly in front of the front door. So, maybe that's nothing. But, the fact that I specifically asked, for something pretty much exactly of that description, and it occurred the next day, this kind of stuff is definitely interesting. But here's something even more interesting, and I wish I had talked about this earlier. But the first segment of that documentary was about near-death experiences, and that was another point where I realized that thank you so much, crypto coder. I Okay, so people die and then they come back and they experience all these synchronicities. They start having precognitions. Like, it sounded exactly what I live with, and also what increased these experiences. They increase dramatically after contact with like DMT in particular and some other plant medicines. Or LSD, whatever, anything that brings those filters down. In fact, if you're just a meditator and you don't use psychedelics, the old masters would warn the students against, to ignore the cities, which are these manifestations of these capacities of consciousness that we have, I think, devolved. They've been subjected to de-evolution. Because they are not pragmatic. They would interfere with our basic survival functions. And so anything that brings those filters down, or anything that facilitates the cross-regional communication of the brain that doesn't normally occur, and psilocybin and LSD do that more than anything known. Master meditators have had brain scans, and if you compare those to people on LSD and psilocybin, it blows the masters out of the water just in terms of new brain activity in regions that aren't normally used, which I would assume, it means something is happening. And I would think that the ability to perceive these more subtle nuances of our conscious experience are facilitated by this brain activity in these, or that's what it's indicative of when we record it. That's probably what that is. It's the regions of the brain that deal with this stuff, and they're suddenly active. So I noticed that, and it's interesting to note that some researchers actually think that the filters in the brain being taken down by DMT and psilocybin and these other compounds. Totally lost my train of thought, and we're probably being redundant at this point anyways. I think those pans are starting to work. What the fuck was I talking about? Oh, got it. Okay, and this is good. Quantum coherence. What I was trying to get to originally with all of that is that with brain activity totally none, stopped, dead, you're dead. You've been dead for minutes, right? There are several very well documented instances of this occurring. Where people have definitely had no brain activity, and yet when they were resuscitated, in one case, probably the most impressive, this woman was dead for like 45 minutes, and she was not in an ice cold pond, and so she should have had severe brain damage. She said that her chances of not having severe brain damage were statistically zero, and regardless of that, she could recount everything that had been done, everything that had been said, the positions of all the vehicles in the parking lot. There was absolutely no question that she had been present for all of this stuff, and she described going up into like another realm and not wanting to return and interacting with some kind of spirit being. There's another case, a woman had been dead on the operating table for 12 minutes or something, and she knew all of this stuff. And also, in the case of this woman, she knew she was going to die that day, and she had told all these people, and this had the premonitions and whatnot had actually started weeks before she actually died. And so here's the big fucking problem, right? And I think it is important for us to look for the mechanisms that facilitate this kind of stuff, because that's sort of the problem, I think, in the metaphysical and spiritual community. Is I'm always saying that people either reject all this stuff out of hand, or they're just willing to believe it just because they want to or something, and that's just not healthy. And it also, I think if we really believe that spiritual illumination is the antidote to the atom bomb, that these experiences encourage people to live in a way that is harmonious with life and creation, we don't want to discourage people by being a bunch of muddle-headed mystics and believing a bunch of nonsense for no good reason. So I started thinking, okay, let's think about physics. If consciousness is energy, I mean, it's somehow created by energy. It's got something to do with relationships that are predicated on the existence of subatomic particles, at the very least. So, quantum coherence, and I'm going to have to do a little bit more research into this specific thing, but the gist of it is that the subatomic particles that constitute our consciousness do not know if we're alive or dead. I mean, they might, maybe they're conscious, but in terms of like functionality, it doesn't make any difference to those particles. And so I think that the same forces that maintain the coherence of an atom do not disperse just because we die. And so the relations between the particles, so it was kind of mind-blowing to think this isn't even really that much of a stretch. Like, science has been so opposed, that when you die, if there's no brain activity, what is going to support your consciousness? It's really not that difficult to, at least come up with like one basic hypothesis for how what could sustain that. that doesn't require us to violate any laws of our deterministic reality. Uh, Entanglement is another element that I think could help to inform us about, what could maintain our consciousness. This relationship between entangled particles suggests that they are always there, um, and they are also paired with other functioning particles. And so, if you die and some of your energy is not, I mean, like I said, I don't see why whether our body is alive or not is really going to have any influence on the behavior of these particles. But even if it did, I guess what I'm saying is that the other entangled particles, their function would sustain the function of the particles that are part of our consciousness. So it's like this thing that we think of as this individually centered process of consciousness that science wants to think is in the brain, even though there's actually, if you look at the research, there's no evidence to support that consciousness originates in the brain. Um, so, what I'm getting at with all of that, I think clearly, is that I think we're very, very close to being able to understand things like the continuity of consciousness, and how consciousness could survive brain death in a way that doesn't violate any deterministic or scientific um, principles, which is good because we need that. Let me see what else I mentioned in the quantum coherence. Oh, the channeling stuff. Okay, so really, I want to give these examples because they again they illustrate that we always need to consider alternate explanations for these type of phenomena, because um, it's very tempting, I think, to build an ontology that's based on our proclivities and our idiosyncrasies and our desires, and that is not necessarily going to. Um, it's not. It's not how to do it. You know what I mean? It's got to be based on, like, reality, uh, um, and so I think I can't remember the sequence of which of these instances was first, but I think the first time it happened, I was talking to a friend of mine. We were kind of going through this awakening process together, me and this group of people. Um, and one day, she told me that her sister had committed suicide when she was 14. I think she was 22 at the time. And instantly, I had this feeling of that there was a girl behind me. And she said, I didn't kill myself. And I said, your sister didn't kill herself. And my friend was like, actually, the police suspected foul play. And I was like, yeah, it was her boyfriend. And she was found strung up by her stockings in the park, and she had a really abusive, jealous boyfriend. Of course, I didn't know any of that. So, but it's not like I had any, like, specific details that I didn't have access to, but it did seem at least interesting to me that I felt this presence, and it did seem that, the information that I got from this spirit was at least potentially accurate. Um, it's also interesting, by the way, if you've never encountered any of these spirit beings, my experience so far, well, I've heard words a few times, but usually it's this, like, silent telepathic sort of communication. Hearing's not really the right word. It's just like you just understand that this information is coming from this thing, particularly with, like, ayahuasca and DMT entities. They don't ever speak. I mean, I've never, like, heard one say something, but the feeling of being communicated with is definitely, and you understand, every word, but it's not that kind of communication. So okay, so the next instance of this, I was talking to my mom on the phone, and my middle names come from a soulmate that she had when she was a teenager who died. And I went during the same period of awakening, I guess. And by the way, there was a lot of stuff going on during this period. I was dreaming, like there were certain old rare books that I would want to get my hands on, and I would have a dream. I would tell people so that another time I had a precognition that a flood was going to come and kill a bunch of people, and um, I was like way up in the Rocky Mountains, and I thought this is not really, it doesn't really make sense, but it was powerful enough. I actually put fishing poles in case we needed to survive, and drove up into the peaks, and it did rain like crazy, and I came down, and there was no flood, and I felt kind of dumb. And the next morning, also the thing that I noticed in the vision that I had that accompanied this message, was that the river, the flood appeared to be in the desert, and I was in the, I mean, it was kind of desert, but it's like we were up in the foothills, so it's not desert, sagebrush and stuff. But this was like Middle Eastern desert. And so the next day I drive down to the gas station, and there's the front page of the newspaper: flood in Pakistan kills 800. And I think by the time it was over, it had killed a few thousand people. And so that was a lesson in the possibility that I had precognized this accurately, but that I had reacted based on my own impulse and not really, set with it and tried to process and get the specific details from her. But so this type of stuff is happening a lot in this period, and so I'm on the phone with my mother, and I had this feeling that she had lied to me about how this guy died, and so I asked her, so James Michael, what really happened? And she was kind of quiet, and then she said, well, he killed himself. I think she told me that he died in a motorcycle accident originally, because I was a little kid, and she didn't want to say, he was huffing paint and drinking alcohol and in a golf course. And so when she said that, this voice in my ear said, ask her about Steve Miller. And I thought at first, because Steve Miller was like this classic rock artist, and I was like, what? I know she likes Steve Miller, but so I thought it was kind of silly, but I was like, okay, what does Steve Miller have to do with this? And she was just dead silent. And then she said, that's the name of the guy that he caught his girlfriend cheating on him with that provoked him to commit suicide. And freaked her out, man. She didn't speak to me for like 2 weeks after that, because I think it was just one of those like ontology shaking things that just fucked with her. And so I think only a few days later, I had taken initiation earlier that year in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Stella Matutina, the Order of the Morning Star, and so the head of the order had taken to like calling me at like weird random times. It really was like being in some kind of like sci-fi movie all of a sudden or something. The stuff that was happening, and secret societies involvement, and eventually there were like Sioux Sundance chiefs and medicine men from all these different tribes involved with the situation, and they were telling us that there were aliens, and weather was being commanded during ceremonies and stuff. So it was a lot. And so I had just started this like medical marijuana business, and it had just become legal in Colorado at the time. And one of my patients was a guy that was an ex-gang member from Mexico. And at this point, he was like, 70 something probably, and seemed pretty harmless. And I didn't really ever think of him that way. So I didn't realize that I was going to provoke him to shoot me in the head, which is what nearly happened. But so I get this call from the director, not director, that's a silly thing to call him, from Robert. I might as well use his real name, because you guys could just look up the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And by the way, if you guys are ever considering joining one of these fraternities, The one, don't join that one. So Robert calls me up and what's going on here? Okay, well, what are we doing here? How's this thing? Okay, I think I have internet again. So we're talking about Jose, um, and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and so he sees this guy and he's like, "That's my brother," and I'm like, "No, it's not. It's definitely McGregor Mathers," and he's freaked out already. I guess I mean the guy, and it's weird. McGregor Mathers did hella look like a Mexican dude, and and I was like looking at Mathers and thinking like, yeah. Well, I'm not saying that Robert like consciously knew exactly what was going on. I don't think that's necessarily how it works. I never asked him, but he would do this kind of thing all the time. He would contact me in these really strange moments where he had some insight or some cryptic shit to say that I would have to figure out, and then it would help me to move past whatever I was hung up on. Consistent. He was with that, and now I understand that if you have been working with consciousness for long enough, you just kind of can anticipate and intuit these kind of things, and so I realize what it is I'm supposed to do, and I get Jose and I tell him to come into the other room, and this was the only time I had done this deliberately as well. The other times it just kind of happened. It was like somebody was whispering in my ear, and I just said what I was hearing, and it turned out to be, significant. Um, so So I go out into the living room with Jose, and I lay down on the floor, and I remember I took a hit of pot and closed my eyes, and everything turned purple, and it was the exact same hue that you always see in like the New Age stores. They're always like that blue and purple, like they have draperies everywhere, and it's like the New Age colors. I've never asked a New Ager what that's about exactly, and maybe this is it. Maybe before you channel from the spirit world, everything turns purple. I don't really know. But what I do know is that I close my eyes, and please bear in mind that I'm thinking, part of me is thinking, this is so dumb, dude. I cannot believe you're doing this right now. And so Jose, as I've said, has already freaked the fuck out, and it didn't occur to me that this guy is a Catholic gangbanger. You know, were you able to get the gist of the stuff I sent a while back? Yes, but I sent you a message asking you what exactly it was that what your source was for some of that material. I don't know that you answered me. Um, okay, yeah, a little fuzzy. Yeah, I think it's stormy here, so it's just really the internet is not very solid. So at any rate, here's what happened. So I'm I'm laying on the floor, and I was like, who is Charlie or whatever the name was, and he's like, that's my brother's dog. And I was like, what about Christina? And he's like, that's the bitch that set them up to get shot. And so I just kept going with all this stuff that was popping into my head, and his eyes were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so once I had established, that there was definitely, I was like channeling this stuff, or that I had a message for him, um, I kind of changed the subject and started trying to get him to to convince him to let go of his desire for revenge, because it had been eating him alive his whole life, and eventually it appeared that I had. And this is where things got really fucking weird. The documentary, they talk about how sometimes there are physical manifestations, and there's some pictures and stuff that seem like they're maybe could be real, but the moment that he said that he forgave this guy, and the guy had been murdered already, so it's like he killed his brother and somebody killed him, but he couldn't go kill this guy because he was already dead. And so he's just like, he can't get his revenge, you know. So when he finally agrees that he should forgive this man, this fucking thing, like this big, it looked like a mosquito hawk. You guys know what those are? People say they eat mosquitoes, which isn't actually true, but it's what it looks like a giant. It kind of looked like that, only it was way too big, almost like a mandrake root or something. And it dropped out of his lampshade right next to his head, and he's already bug-eyed, you know, from the whole experience. And then he looks at this thing, and I see him pull his fist back like he's gonna punch it, you know. And that's when I realized, like, this is real. Like, that thing is big enough that he didn't, you know, when you smack a mosquito, you're like open, you know. He's like putting his dukes up to hit this thing, and it flew out the window. Now I was like, no, because I was like, don't punch the spirit of your brother in case that's what that thing is, you know. So I don't know what the fuck happened there. I mean, I was in southwestern Colorado, and there's definitely no insect that I'm aware of that is, you know, 6 inches long and looks like a mosquito hawk and has a, you know, inch thick body or whatever. It didn't look real. I mean, it looked real. It didn't look cartoony. It wasn't translucent. You know, it looked like a thing that was there, for real, you know, and it didn't look like a fairy or something, but it also didn't look like anything that made any sense either. And it was like the moment that he understood that, you know, his brother would want him to drop it at this point because he's just going to put himself in the grave earlier. And so remember what I mentioned about not realizing that I was going to want to provoke him to want to shoot me in the head. The next day, I saw his son, and he was sitting on the porch like crying, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but I realized pretty quickly he was crying about the situation with me and his dad the day before, and he looked at me and he's like, dude, he was gonna blow your fucking head off, which is because he was Catholic, and I guess rather than having this reaction of like, oh, this was amazing, this guy channeled the, you know, my brother or whatever happened there, he was thinking this guy's possessed by Satan and I need to shoot him in the head, while I was sitting there doing this, I guess. And he told his son as much the next day, which this has nothing to do with the rest of this, but it is an interesting story. Just to put in perspective what kind of people I was unwittingly dealing with here. They were banditos, which is like a Mexican biker gang, kind of like the equivalent of a Hell's Angels, but they were old. His brother, that, you know, I was also a caregiver for, he was dying from AIDS and cancer, and they were just sweet and old, and I knew about their history, but I just could not relate to their present being as that. But so Jose's brother calls me one day, and he's like wanting to set me up with a partner for my medical marijuana business from Texas because the guy was tired of being illegal, he said. So Jose's brother calls me and he says, well, he's dead, so we'll just call him Ricky because that was his name. He can't get mad at me for that, using his real name, I guess. And he said, okay, so you want this guy to bring you some dolomite lime, which is a white powder. And I was like, sure. And he's like, how much? And I was like, as much as he can get, I guess, you know. And it didn't even, I didn't have the slightest clue that he was talking in code and that I was getting myself into some seriously deep shit. And then he called back and he said, how about some dirt? And at that point I was kind of like, there are shops everywhere here. Like, we don't really need him to drive up, like, and he's like, it's mud, you know, like muddy dirt. And that should have been a clue, but still I was just like, whatever, man, just tell him to bring whatever he can. I don't care, it's fine, you know. And then he calls back again and he's like, what about, like hardware, like tools? I was like, sure, dude, whatever, you know, just tell him to bring whatever. A few days later, I realized that I had just ordered a bunch of cocaine, heroin, and guns from the Mexican mafia without realizing, and that's actually one of the reasons I left Colorado, because it arrived, and I think it wasn't until then that I realized what I had done, that I was going to be expected to move this stuff or pay them for it or something, and that's not what I signed up for. So that was crazy, man. The way that that situation resolved actually has got a lot to do with what prompted me to actually go to California. And there are a lot of people in my band and stuff at the time that was really poised to do well, that don't know that still to this day, I think. I haven't told them that it wasn't just that I just bailed on them. But so I think I remembered another one though, this channeling of, okay. So, but back to the earlier, what I prefaced all that with, that none of this is actually proof that I'm communicating with dead people. There's not a single thing that I said to any of those people that the person that I was talking to didn't know. So, it's like your brain waves are picking all this stuff up, and it's like you are directing, this is the information that we want, and it's in that person's mind, and then it comes over, and then, the medium believes that they have received communications from the spirit world. The person they're talking to is impressed. Everyone walks away thinking that that's what happened, but I'm not saying it's not, but I am saying it's not proof. It just never. So, and please, in the comment section, if any of you guys can think of a way that we could devise an experiment, because apparently, if there is such a thing as a medium, I am one. I've never thought about it. But I think that almost gives it more credibility, because it's not something that I'm in a hurry to embrace or believe in, or, and I'm still skeptical, even though I have consistently, and as I said, it's like when I did that on those few occasions where I was speaking to things that only the dead person that I'd never met, that they knew, you know what I mean? Like, I knew specific. I didn't stutter, I didn't stumble, I didn't throw pieces and bits, and I didn't even say, like, is there a name with a C, which I've even seen some of the most convincing mediums just kind of just toss this, a J name. It's like, so what, man? There are tons of common J names in the United States. That's, oh, nice. I've wondered if we're all mediums or if we could be. I think that mediumship is, or being a shaman is, the same thing. I think all that we can really do is accept that there are some capacities of consciousness that extend beyond what our normal, rational stuff, the normal parameters are not in the right place, clearly. And I think that at this point there are enough. I don't think anyone really thinks, even in the scientific community, I think the parameters of what is considered possible, even among deterministic or purely material people, it's expanded out of necessity, because, for example, they've been confronted with dead people that know everything that was happening in the room. So we know that consciousness can survive past brain death. And I was thinking, well, maybe our machinery just can't detect really, really weak energy or something, or the cells, even though they're not being sustained by energy anymore, are still functioning for. And they said it's true, but only for like 3 minutes or something. And one of these people was dead for an hour and remembered all of it. And also, these people consistently will have the vantage point of being like up high, and or going into a different room and observing things accurately that have happened in the waiting room when the body is they're not in earshot. So we know that something for sure, no skeptic, no rationalist, no one can refute some of the stuff that's happened in terms of the veracity of the evidence, or however you would want to put it. And so why does this shit matter? That's the thing. And of course it matters a lot. In the world today, what we have is it's like it's a clusterfuck of just insanity, and um, I think that what I'm seeing is that, for example, in the United States, where I'm from, this fucking lunacy on the political um, shenanigans, I guess. The there are two things that facilitate that. One of them is Jesus, and the other one is fear. Um, and I don't really mean Jesus. What I mean is American mainstream Christianity. Um, but the fear is a huge constituent in what drives people or puts them in a state where they can be manipulated, or where a lot of the decisions come from. Any decision made out of love is correct, and any decision made out of fear is wrong, is one way that I've heard this expressed, and I think that that's accurate. Um, so I think that the experience of connectivity with a universal consciousness, it definitely changes how we relate to the world. And I also think that if you have a race of people that are that know, or at least have reason to believe, and that the death is just nothing more than changing your clothes, people are going to operate a lot differently. Your relationship to materialism is going to change. The way that you see your possessions is going to change. Your fear of adventure um, uh, and threat. You know, if you're going up against a tyrannical government and you don't care if you get shot in the head because you know you're just going to put a new meat suit on and come right back. It's not that you don't care. I mean, that's not convenient, you know. But you know what I'm saying? A fully realized, fully conscious human race would be way more difficult to manipulate and to frighten into any kind of behavior at all. And also, these religions that have plagued us will go away. Speaking of woo and not letting it in too much, and balancing skepticism and open-mindedness, so that the wind doesn't start whistling through your ears. Uh, and I'm not directing this at any individual, because I know some of you will watch these videos, because there are so many people that I've had this conversation with recently. Oh, I was gonna pull a Rogan and smoke during my podcast, but my lighter's dead. I have another one, maybe. No, all dead lighters. Actually, it's probably not dead. We were walking across the river earlier, and pretty sure everything in my pockets got. Oh, it's working. Anyways, this thing about Jesus. One of the things I've observed, because I've played a role in the awakening process of a lot of people for a lot of years, and I don't think I have ever seen a single European or American that can go through this process without having to struggle with their Christian programming. It's like, and it's actually designed to do that, to intercept you. It reminds me of these stories that I've heard of, like the CIA. You know, they supposedly have these psychics that will guard, like, you know, when people are getting close to illumination, and send these scary faces to interrupt their meditation and drive them away from the gates or whatever. Well, that's the thing, Bobby. Jesus was not a historical person, absolutely, for sure, 100%. I was discussing this with a friend the other day, and he's like, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree. This is like, the saying that Jesus was a historical personage at this point is like standing next to the Great Pyramid and saying it's not really there. Like, the evidence is that solid, that there never was a Jesus. It doesn't even make sense. I saw a guy the other day talking about how Jesus was this name of power on the spiritual plane, that he could drive away any kind of frightening demon shit, whatever. I was like, you realize that's not how you would say it, right? So in magic, like if a word has power, it's very important that you know what the fucking word is. And Jesus is a Latinized version of Yoshua or Yehoshua, which is Joshua or Savior in Hebrew. And yeah, I mean, even devout Catholics understand the lies. That's something that'll blow your mind. Absolutely crazy to watch. Bill Mayer made this documentary called Religiosity, and he went to the Vatican and he's talking to these popes or no, the priests, one of them, and they are so confident that the followers are brainwashed enough that it doesn't matter what they say, that they'll speak openly about the fact that Christianity is a myth, that none of it's true, and how they're just manipulating people for money. Like the priest talks to him openly about this. But I just want to give you guys an example of, you know, rational people. Like once those doors are open, you know, that there could be more, or the doors of woo, we could call them. People tend to just lose their bearings, and that's not good. And you know, one of these people that I've been having this argument with in particular is a mathematician, and when we met, he was definitely the more scientifically minded of the two of us. And you know, he's very insistent that Jesus was a real person, even though there is not one historical record. Even though the Romans kept fastidious anal records of every arrest, every trial, everything that ever happened in Rome, there is not any mention anywhere of a Jesus of Nazareth. There's not one person that wrote in their diary anywhere that he went that they had encountered this Jew with these huge crowds of people and stuff. I mean, there are very minor historical figures that have some record that they existed. There is literally nothing anywhere that suggests that there was ever a Jesus of Nazareth or a Yoshua that had followers. It's just not real. And then in 2012, it was discovered that the Romans, they discovered a document. The Romans had actually, somebody had written down, like, we invented Jesus Christ and this is why. And they go on to explain why they invented Jesus, because the Palestinians had this Messiah that was like warrior-like, and they thought, okay, well, if we can get them to stop emulating a warrior and start emulating be a sheep. Don't think for yourself. Just fight, follow this guy that's a pacifist, and quit fighting back and quit thinking for yourself, you know. And so they actually talk about how they designed it. Aside from just the effort to replace this warrior Messiah, they describe different elements of it that are sort of like psychological devices that preclude true spiritual connection. And as an initiate of the mystery schools, when I read it, I mean, I know the Bible like the back of my hand, you guys. I can quote from probably any book in there. And I know what they did, and I know how they did it. I know what they're talking about when I read it. It's incontrovertibly 100% positively true that there was never a Jesus of Nazareth, that the guy in the Bible is a bunk, fake, it's not real. And even to the extent that the stops along his where he gave his big sermons and did all this stuff, it's the military campaign of Titus. Every single one of these stops. Everything that happens in his childhood, his birth date, everything about him is modeled on older myths. And in fact, one of the people that is arguing that, oh, well, I just disagree, even though it's like, it's like disagreeing that there's a sun that comes up every day at this point. There's nothing to disagree about. It's just your indoctrination. You're clinging to this. As soon as you have a spiritual awakening, and like I said, this was part of the design of the myth. They did this on purpose. And it's just anything that has been just beaten into your head your entire life, it's just part of your being. And so what I was saying is I've never seen a European person or an American be able to go through the awakening process without going through this. Part of it is like having this difficulty in overcoming the Judeo-Christian influence. And and it's crazy to watch like otherwise rational people defend an idea without a shred of evidence, without any kind of reason. And I think also what can happen is that, you may have the feeling that you're communicating with the spirit of Jesus or Mary or one of these things. And it's really just your own head. And, or it could be something else and you're just putting a label on it. And again, it's really important to remember that, especially people get cocky. I lost the ability to distinguish between my own thoughts and genuine precognitions to an extent for a while. And I think that a lot of people, you get cocky and you want to believe that your intuitions and these experiences on the spirit plane are real, and you start attributing objective reality to stuff that is just absolute nonsense. So we definitely want to watch out for that. And that's when I was talking about the integration and giving some advice before we go, because I want to go spend time with my partner, and I actually just noticed I'm tripping pretty hard. Which is funny. If you guys tuned into this before I changed the thumbnail, I did actually end up eating the mushrooms because not with the intention of really tripping, but just microdosing. But they're just so goddamn strong, the pancyans, when they're fresh. And I didn't really think about that it's been raining consistently for the last few days, so there's been cloud cover, and psilocybin is destroyed by UV rays. So usually we don't go out until the afternoon, and they've been sunbaked a little bit. So I actually just ate a little bit thinking that it might improve my articulation, or bring the veils down so that I can communicate from the universal mind more directly. And it was a little bit more than I bargained for sure. I don't know how long you guys have been watching, but a couple times I was like on a roll, and then just all of a sudden it's like I'll hit a wall and there's no looking back. Like, what the fuck was I just talking about? And it's just not possible to recall anymore, And if you guys have any questions too, I'm happy to engage with you guys. Well, it's not about denying people's faith, man. But honestly, I don't think that's good. I really don't think it's good. People should not have faith in things that aren't true. They shouldn't. I know, it's like part of our culture to say, well, everyone's entitled to their beliefs, and sure, no one should be forced to believe anything. But should we not discourage people from believing things that we know to be false? Absolutely. I don't care how much facts don't care about your feelings, and neither do I, to a certain extent. And when you look at the damage, and this is one of those cases where you can use the words of Jesus to completely tear him to the ground. By the way, I find no fault with any of his teachings. They're just not real. And I know where they came from, and I'm absolutely positive that they're not real. So there are several elements to it that make it worthy of being subjected to de-evolution and de-emphasis and removal from the face of the planet altogether, if possible. And if you look at the wake of destruction and death and the loss of entire cultures, not just like people, but entire cultures decimated in the name of Jesus. If my past life recollections are real, I've been burned at the stake like 3 times because I just was challenging Jesus and Christianity and was burned as a fucking heretic. The Salem witch trials, they were burning 13-year-old girls alive. If someone were to say, well, the Hitler Youth taught kids discipline and they did a lot of good things, so we should be okay with Nazis. To me, the crucifix in Christianity is no different. It's not any different. And whenever anyone defends or is an apologist for Christianity, I literally feel like I'm talking to someone with a swastika on their arm saying, yeah, but we teach kids discipline. Don't throw rocks at hookers. This is like a great teaching of Jesus. Like, duh, there's nothing there that isn't just basic morality. So if there are elements of this religion that compel people to murder entire civilizations, and we can teach basic morality without it, it can go the fuck away, and the sooner the better. So I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good that, of course you shouldn't it's not like I'm suggesting that society should put up penalties, put people in jail for carrying Bibles around or something. It's not like that. But I think that being open and challenging people and saying like, look, this is not only is this not true, it's not good either. And it's not. And one of the reasons that the Romans chose the myth, or the way that one of the reasons they designed it as it were, was actually to destroy empathy in people while giving them a sort of false sense of being compassionate. And if I didn't just describe mainstream Christianity, almost every single person involved in it to a T, you know, um, and it is this that it creates a bunch of really bad precedents. One of them is that you can just believe whatever with your whole heart, and that makes it true, regardless of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. That's how we have Presidente Bush or Trump, whatever. What's the difference, anyways, really? But you know what I mean? People can. It's like once you accept that you can believe anything that you want, regardless of evidence or without evidence or whatever, you've created a precedent in the mind to do this with everything, and so that has nearly destroyed the United States. I mean, that is. I think that the way that Christianity has been interpreted and applied is the number one thing that has destroyed the country that I'm from. And the other problem is that the idea that someone else can suffer for your sins is like literally the most toxic, evil fucking idea that you could possibly put into people's heads. And I've literally also heard people that have killed people, and that, one of the guys almost killed the guy, beat him half to death with a tire iron. I know I've talked about this in other live streams and videos, so I'm going to change the subject soon. But people that do that kind of thing have literally told me that they, when I challenge them to say, how can you be a Christian and do this sort of thing? They're like, that's how I can do it. It's why I can do it. I can do anything, and Jesus will forgive me. So, it's just awful, and we need to eradicate it if possible. So, long story short, you guys, it does seem like as we are evolving, and this is happening very, very rapidly, and I do think that the elites and their what is cinching down on the erosion of free speech, and the mountains of propaganda that they're inundating us with, and the fact that we can't gather anywhere and we can't have concerts, and all of these things that would be allowing us as a movement of people with expanded awareness and expanded consciousness to expand and empower ourselves are severely, severely, severely limited. And I think that it is also very suspicious that the most famous person in the Capitol raid was calling himself a shaman. And I mean, I looked at his profile or whatever. I mean, it's like what a cop would write if they were trying to pretend to be a shaman. Like, the guy's either totally fake shaman, or he's a cop, or what do you call it, like a government agent. And it's not conspiratorial to think that they would do that. They've been doing that since the 60s. At least they infiltrate groups and they create misinformation. We know they do this, and people are like, oh, that's so paranoid. No, it's not. They have set historical precedents for this type of behavior, or that doing that type of shit. Actually, it kind of does, George. The precognition thing. I've thought about this. And the precognitions, man, that is totally fucking okay. But I want to finish the QAnon shaman thing. Now they have thrown the psychedelic culture into the terrorist bandwagon, which I think is really fucking scary. And again, call me paranoid, but it's not like the researchers in the 60s told them that psychedelics were dangerous, and they told them what I would tell you that they do. Seriously, they really did. They, it might as well have been me, writing the paper. It's the same. Um, and that's why they made them illegal. So I I really didn't like that, man. I mean, and the guy's outfit was so stupid. Like, this is what a cop would, you know what I mean? Like, if you were some completely clueless government official, this is the costume you might put a white guy in if you thought he was trying to pretend to be a shaman. Um, but whether they did it or not, it's still in. I immediately I saw it all over Facebook. People, the QAnon shaman, and this is why psychedelics can be dangerous, and all of this kind of bullshit. Um, but George, the precognition thing. There are several deterministic explanations from physics that I think can actually explain precognition to an extent. Uh, and I have precognition all the time, to an extent that it freaks me the fuck out. And I'll share one that's really scary with you guys right now, because I have a young child. He's 14 months, and um, I'm only 41. So it doesn't really, I don't really want to die. And I've been in bad health for a long time, to the extent that I have been worried that I would die. Um, but before it was really that concerning, well before I was actually worried. I didn't even really think that I was sick. I thought I was just having some off mornings or something. Uh, I drank San Pedro, and I got this message that I was going to die, and I thought it meant like now, and it just happened that my partner and everybody was out of town. And I'm in South America, like it's not common here, but you can like Venezuelan refugees and stuff will come and rob and kill people sometimes. Usually they just rob, no one gets hurt. Um, but still, and also I did have some enemies here because of the flat Earth debate. These people were threatening to kill me for insisting that the Earth was actually a sphere. Um, and this was right after that, so I was actually like ducking around the windows and, you know what I mean, in case anybody was trying to shoot me uh, and then eventually I got the message from the cactus that that's not what it meant exactly, and then I should just lay down and listen. And so I did, and then it was like, you need to like change certain behaviors and stuff because there will come a day when you can no longer say I'm sorry, and that day could be sooner than you would like. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? And I mean, I can just like do, and it just cut me off and said some things just can't be helped. And so after that point, I've progressively become more and more ill. And I've also noticed that, for example, I advised on a certain date, like I know it was like in March somewhere, that people should invest in Bitcoin and MindMed. And MindMed went up 1,150%. So I didn't have any money at the time, but I was telling other people, you got some money, throw it in MindMed. So I've been trying to like monitor these kind of intuitive impulses and see what would come of them. And so when I had the impulse of, well, if you did own the stock, you should sell now, I got online and looked, and MindMed had just started to drop again. And so if I had spent even just $1,000, which I could have gotten away with, it would be $1,150, 11,500, excuse me, dollars. And this is only 7 months ago or something, So, and another one was the Bitcoin thing. When somebody asked me to live stream a week ago or so, how can we make some money as conscious people? And Bitcoin's not really, I mean, in terms of like environmental impacts, it's not really, I can't really endorse it in that way. But as a way to potentially make quick money, sure. I don't know about the ethics of it, but so someone asked me, and I said, well, I wouldn't do the Bitcoin thing anymore. And in fact, I would sell right now, and then the next day it fell by $10,000 per coin. And so I have been looking for measurable phenomena that I can check myself against and see how consistent these precognitions are. I've also had some just incredibly weird, accurate precognitions, but then when the cactus tells you you're going to die, and no plant spirit has ever told me anything that hasn't turned out to be true, and my precognitions are extremely reliable, um, yikes, man. And who knows? I mean, it absolutely could be true. Certainly could be true. In fact, this could be hella eerie for you guys later. That man, 2 days before this guy died, he told us that he had these precognitions. And in fact, the documentary I was talking about earlier in the live stream, um, one of the people that died and was brought back was talking about how they were having all these precognitions about their death, and they told people. Um, and of course, for someone like myself, that it seems like the evidence is pretty overwhelming at this point that we know that consciousness does survive physical death. Um, I'm pretty confident. I even know that 6 or 7 of my previous incarnations, who they were. That doesn't really, I still have a 14-month-old, and I think this can also represent, when I talk about how the expansion of consciousness has its dangers, and that dabbling in mysticism definitely can be threatening to your sanity. This is a good example of that, because I think I mentioned in the description about how DMT entities, for example, have told me incredibly specific, give me incredibly specific information over and over again. That one time, which relative had just sent an exact amount of money, and then when the cloud of DMT vision vanished, the phone beeped, and it was true. That my partner would have my babies, was told to me by ayahuasca before there was any indication that that would be something to take seriously. Over and over again, everything I've been told is true, and then so I get that piece of information. And I'm also acutely aware that just believing something like that, because you have a precedent, could make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, when I advocate for skepticism in matters of spirit, and there's good reason for it, because it's entirely possible that even though so many of these intuitions and precognitions and all of this sort of thing have come to pass, that it was just a thought. It was just a fear. I have trouble accepting that, which is alarming. In this case, it doesn't feel like that. But nevertheless, you cannot believe everything you think. And so you have to be careful with those kind of premonitions. What I was saying about physics and the possibility that there are mechanisms that could explain precognition, there is quantum symmetry that I think could offer an explanation. And the way that I was thinking about this is that I've had these visions of how consciousness works, where there are like these individual particles or photons of light that morph and they change time, and so they do this thing where you can never see the whole thing all at once, because it doesn't exist all at once in relation to your temporal habitation at the moment. And so they appear to always be moving and morphing, but really it's just that you can't perceive the whole thing from one vantage point in time. And so this idea that consciousness is the fundamental thing that is generating our reality, and that it does so by creating relation in geometry, is the best I can really do in terms of articulating it. And I know that everything at the micro is also reflected in the macro. And it's not that these are exact reproductions of process, but they are still reflective in the sense that they're all modeled on this one thing doing one thing. And so the way that these particles function with this symmetry when we have these synchronistic experiences, it's just occurred to me that this has got something to do with symmetry in energy. And so I hope I did that some justice in trying to explain it, but and there always is a mechanism that facilitates things, right? Things don't just like happen out of nothing. Um, so even if there's some wooier element to synchronicities, you know, and it is interesting to me that they don't seem to just manifest. They always happen with this timing where there is a subjective or internal element to it that makes explaining how it could happen in the physical realm a little bit more difficult. Um, but at the end of the day, I think we'll find that every phenomena that manifests on the physical plane has its modes or its means, its mechanistic shit to facilitate its occurrence, you know. And so I am getting tired, and it's been a while. So I'm going to sign out. Please do hit the like button if you haven't already. Share, subscribe, support us on Patreon if you can. We have been demonetized. So, and normally, you know, you guys would hit that little button that just gives me tips, and it's not there anymore because my AdSense account has been closed. So I realize it's an extra step, but we do appreciate your support. And we are still doing the Schwar thing. We are leaving at the end of the month and going into the Amazon rainforest. And on the way, we're going to spend a month in Banos. And I'm going to set the family up there, and then I'll go into the jungle to meet with the Schwar and see what that is all about. And then decide whether or not to bring the family into the jungle with me. Or if I'll just, what's it called, commute, I guess. And the place that we're going, Banos, is hot springs it has, and an active volcano, which I've never seen. So I don't know if it's possible to like go up around the crater and hang out. And I think it's a really stupid thing to do anyways, because the last trail my friend sent me a picture of, and I was like, literally, this is almost like one of those precognition scenarios. I was like thinking like, wow, it'd be cool to go like stand. I was like imagining myself standing right at the thing looking at the lava, you know, which I'm sure you're not allowed to do that, or at least it's probably advised that you don't, because I know that it spits shit out that could land on your head and kill you all the time, and that's what happens, I guess, is the bullet point of this presentation. There are like tombstones and cairns and stuff because they don't want to even carry a body down from 17,000 feet, or you know, in this. I think these grave sites were still like 3,000 feet from the peak or something. So it does seem that it's dangerous to even get close to it. So I don't know that you guys can expect any videos of the crater, but if I can approach it, I will. I'll show you that. So support us if you can. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. Good night, everybody.